All right, let's get started today. It is episode 5. Y'all, life has been a little bit hectic. We are actually going on a month-long trip to New Zealand in the next week and a half. And between now and then, we are going traveling on both weekends for 3 days. So we really have almost just 4 days left in Helsinki at this point before we go on our trip. So yeah, that's a little bit, I'm like pre-recording this a little bit in advance because I'm just trying to like prep everything for the trip, for the plans that we have before we're leaving. Work has been busy, so life has just been a little bit hectic. And yeah, in hindsight, like looking at when I have launched this podcast has been the busiest month for me in quite a few months. And then, yeah, next in just a week and a half, we're going on this trip for a month. So I have not exactly decided yet just how many episodes I'm going to be able to put out in September. My goal is that I could pre-record 2 episodes before I head out of town, but let's see. There's a lot going on. We have not really made plans for the trip yet. I mean, okay, we have all of the basic itinerary planned. Well, we don't have an itinerary actually, but we have a van. We are renting a van in New Zealand, so we have the van. And we have not really decided where we are taking the van, but we have all of the plane tickets, we have the van booked, but I would like to at least have more or less some sort of idea of where we will be driving and the places we want to hit. So, yeah, a lot going on. But we've made it to episode 5, which today we are talking about friendships in your 20s, near and far. So, yeah, friendships locally, just talking about friendships in general, making friends when you're in your 20s, and then making friends abroad. And as I just talked about in my last episode on making decisions in your 20s, making friendships in your 20s is also particular for the same reasons, because up until this point in life, you have been put in environments that cultivate friendships very naturally, and they're almost forced upon you in certain situations. And then you graduate college and you enter the real world, and all of a sudden there's not that community and environment that just makes friendships happen naturally. But friendships in this stage of life are so important. I feel like they are absolutely vital to your mental health and to just feeling like you're in a good place and you're thriving. So it's so important that we're able to figure out how to tackle this friendship making in your 20s, even though you aren't just like given friends at this point. Now, I will say that when I'm talking about this, like for me personally, I've only ever made friends post-college abroad. So I kind of am mushing the 2 topics, but I'm going to try to separate them just a bit. And first part, just talk about making friends as an adult. And then part 2 on making friends while living abroad. And then ending on keeping old friendships alive throughout all of it. So let's jump into part 1, which is making friends as an adult. I think the universal struggle with this is, where do you actually find friends? Because until now, you likely were in college, or at least you went to high school, and you are surrounded by people, number 1, your same age, and number 2, a lot of times with the same interests as you. So either in your university program, what you're studying interests, or after school clubs, you're in a photography club, or you're in, I don't know, some sport or something, or school sports. So you are just surrounded by people who are the same age and have the same interests, and you're on the same life path as well. And now, once you're done with that, then you're in this world where everyone is doing their own thing. So it can be maybe a little bit harder to relate to other people's paths, which I think is actually pretty cool. I think that's actually really nice that you get to then make friends with people who are doing different things than you. But yeah, there's maybe not that baseline level of connection that's automatically a given. So, in general, there's just fewer built in environments where friendships are started and then continue to thrive and get cultivated, and then even more friendships grow. I don't really want to go into like a list of what you can do to make friends. I mean, I'm hoping that if you are in your upper 20s, early 30s, or yeah, if you're just in this stage of life, that you have friendships that you're feeling pretty good about. I more just want to talk about the experience of making friends in your 20s and how it can be kind of awkward, how it can be kind of uncomfortable, and how it is just kind of this trial and error of learning what works and what doesn't work. I think we all know what we can do to go find friends and make friends. And that's like to then look back on, yeah, what did I just mention works, or what helped us make friends when we were growing up. And it's just finding those groups with commonalities. And so we can easily, not easily, but we can do that in our adult life by, joining different clubs or organizations, or even in your work if you want to be friends with your colleagues, but just people with those common interests as you. And from there, I think that that's where like a lot of things spark. One point that I have on my notes when I was brainstorming for this episode was just that I don't really know what the point is. I think it's more of just to explore this idea because I think it's interesting. But is it like, when is the point where you feel like you have enough friends? And then is it okay to get to that point where you're like not really, sometimes like the thought of meeting new people and making new friends at a certain point in life, I feel like it gets a little bit like, oh gosh, like, do I have the capacity? Number one, because having friends means effort and time. And so I feel like we all understand as we're getting deeper into adulthood, I feel like time is very precious. So I do want to pick and choose pretty carefully who I give my energy to and who I'm hanging out with. And so I feel like it's also okay to be a little bit practical about it. And like, if you are feeling fulfilled with the amount of friends that you have in your life, then it's okay not to need to be seeking new people. When I was younger, I did have more friends than I have now. And I feel like sometimes I can get a little bit in my head of like, do I have enough friends? But I feel like I do. I do. I feel very fulfilled friendship wise. But I think it's easy to compare to like, oh, but like, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years ago, I had a lot more friends. And now I have less. But I feel like I have picked and chosen very carefully just because, as I just said, there comes a time when life does just get really busy and you need to choose who you spend your time with and understand that the more people that you add to your life, you're going to have to spread out that time a lot more. So I think it's okay. But yeah, I think it is interesting to feel like I'm getting to a point in life where I'm like, I'm good. And I don't mean that to be like I'm not open to new friendships, but it is nice because I feel like earlier on in your 20s, you're still more in that seeking phase. And then hopefully, as you're getting into your upper 20s, you're feeling a little bit more established into, your friend group and feeling fulfilled by it. But just because I have fewer friends now does not mean that I'm like less fulfilled. I feel like, in fact, because I have fewer friends, my friends are so important. Like, I love my friends deeply and I feel very seen and heard by them. And I hope I make them feel very seen and heard. I feel like I have the proper like time and attention that I can give to the people in my life. But okay, yeah, all of that being said, making friends as an adult, I think it's just a process of trial and error. And then even throughout your 20s, it's kind of like a spectrum of trying it out, establishing some friendships, but it being maybe kind of awkward at the beginning. And then as you're getting a little bit older, then feeling more established with the people around you. Now I'm going to move into talking about making friends abroad. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the only me making friends as an adult has been me making friends abroad. So I think my experience with this is just a mix of the two. But my main complaint or weirdness with making friends abroad, and I kind of want to know from my friends at home or someone who hasn't moved away, if it's similar for you or not. Because for me, I feel like making friends abroad has been a little bit like dating, except the big difference is that you cannot have this breakup conversation if you feel like it's not going well. And that can be so awkward. Like, what do you do if you've put yourself out there, you've tried to meet someone, and you just feel like the vibes are not right? Like, this is not your person. And that's totally fine. But if they don't, okay, if they reciprocate that feeling, like if you know that they also felt the same, then you're good. I think that y'all are both gonna just like let it fizzle out and it won't get awkward. But I have had quite a few scenarios where I don't think the other party felt the same. And then I was stuck in this situation where, yeah, I wasn't feeling like it was going back to that, like, you really need to pick and choose who you want to spend your time with and your energy with. It just, that wasn't the person that I really wanted to spend my time and energy on. And there can't be a breakup conversation. So, yeah, that's my question to people back home. Have you experienced that, or did you experience that in your early 20s where you felt like making friends was kind of like dating? Or is this something very particular to making friends abroad? Because I can see how maybe this would be something particular to the environment of making friends abroad, because the really you end up moving to a place where usually you know no one. And so it really is just about reaching out, setting up blind dates and meeting these people. And for me, I don't love like huge groups of people, so I really would try like meeting people one-on-one, which maybe then makes it a little bit more high pressure on feeling like a date. So yeah, maybe if you join like these group activities instead, then you can kind of make friends a little bit more naturally, and then you don't get into these situations. But in general, making friends abroad, you are going to show up knowing nobody and need to reach out to people and find groups to try to meet up with and just start from scratch. So that starting from scratch feeling, and then with the pressure on top of that, I don't know, maybe there's also an extra pressure of like, a lot of people feel lonely. You are in an environment that's new to you. You are far from your family and friends. And so you're kind of desperate. Like, there are times when you are desperate for friendships and connections. So maybe there's even more of a pressure on making it work with someone because like you met another warm body that you can talk to, rather than it needing to be like a genuine connection. But yeah, interested to hear if people at home have felt similarly or not. So I feel like I just kind of jumped into this topic straight up with friend breakups rather than talking about friendships, making friends when you move abroad. So I'll go into a little bit of my story of when I first moved to Prague, because that is really when I, for the first time, moved somewhere and had nobody. I think the most important part for me was joining Facebook groups. And there's a lot of Facebook groups, especially for expats when you move to a new city. But the bigger the foreign population, the more of these Facebook groups you're going to find. One of them is Girl Gone International. And this is one that's just like a group in general. And then they have them in specific cities. So there's Helsinki Girl Gone International, there's Prague Girl Gone International, London, etc. So wherever you are, you might want to look up if that Facebook group exists, because that's a really good one. I've made quite a few friends from those groups in particular. And then sometimes there's specific ones for women expats, which that's also nice to know that you're speaking to a group of women. And there's going to be a bunch more. So locally, whenever you move somewhere, I feel like you're able to just look up Facebook groups, and that is really where I found quite a few of my friends. And then, of course, you could join some clubs or do some hobby or some sport or something like that, and then friendships will hopefully come from there. But yeah, for me, I found quite a few of my friends through that Prague Girl Gone International Facebook group. And it's really nice because everybody there is so understanding of when someone puts themselves out there. Like you a lot of times you'll like write this message, "Hi, like I'm Mandy, I just moved to Prague," and then tell like a little bit about yourself. And people are generally super welcoming because they understand showing up somewhere, moving somewhere, and having nobody. That is a really great tool as you are trying to make friends abroad. A big downside to making friends abroad is that it can be really hard to make local friends Because, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? But locals a lot of times already have their friend groups. So if I, for example, was still living in Austin, I would have had my solid group of friends. I'm not necessarily looking for more friends. I'm not on these groups for people who've just moved to the city or something. That is a downside because a lot of times when you've just moved somewhere, like you really want to know the locals, you want to know the local traditions, and you want to like feel the authentic side of living there. So it can be kind of unfortunate that you feel like the only people that you can make friends with are other foreigners. But, it is what it is. I think that that's the easiest group to try to make friends with is other people who are also looking for friends. But at some point, I think you will make local friends if you do try to join some maybe more broad groups, such as going to the local yoga studio, or I don't know, some class, if there's some latte art class that you want to do or something. That one came to my mind because I want to take a latte art class. So yeah, I'm sure there's ways to make friends with locals, but it could just be a lot harder than making friends with other expats. All of this to say, making friends abroad can be pretty difficult, but it's possible, and I think it's a lot just like making friends in your early 20s. It's trial and error, it's putting yourself out there, and it's just trying to see what sticks and then choosing those friends carefully. But a good friend will make all of the difference. It will absolutely turn around your experience in a place. And my first experience with that was actually whenever I was an au pair in Spain in 2016, where I had talked a couple episodes ago about how I was super homesick. And what actually turned around that for me was making a friend. And so she is still my friend Helena. She's still one of my best friends to this day. And literally meeting her, so I met her about 1 month into my time in Spain, and she was there working as an au pair as well. I met her on through a Facebook group. I think it was Au Pairs in Madrid. And yeah, I remember that moment of meeting up with her and getting, I think we had tapas and wine or something, and telling her, this is the first time I laughed in a month. I remember just the pure joy of, number one, clicking with someone, because I had met up with people and it just it didn't click for me. And I'm the kind of person where I really want to have a really good connection with someone to continue up that friendship. And so meeting up with her was like immediately best friends. And we just got each other and it was so much fun. And from there, my homesickness, I still experience that, I think, in waves. But for the most part, my whole experience as an au pair was like turned around, and it was so nice. So making friends is like such a make or break situation on how you feel about a place. So if you're stuck, if you're feeling like maybe this isn't the place for you, I don't know, maybe take a look at the people that are around you. If this is, are they adding to your life there? And if not, maybe there's someone out there that you're really going to connect with and that will like just make everything click, because a good friendship can change everything. I think that's really it on making friends abroad. I think there's a lot of sub points that I could really go into on that one, but I want to keep this a little bit more generalized on making friends in your 20s. So let's talk then about keeping old friendships alive. And I think that's really relevant whether you live abroad or not, because no matter what, likely as you are growing older, you're going to have people in your life, friends in your life that you might not be near anymore. And you're going to want to keep those relationships alive, even though it's going to be a whole different thing than it used to be when you either lived near them or maybe, I don't know, had more time to keep up that friendship. I think it all starts with knowing who your people are. So knowing who you are willing to put the effort into, because friendships require effort, they require communication, they require, and it doesn't mean like, I don't mean to say that, oh, friendships are so tough, they take so much time. I have some really good friends that I could go without talking to them for 3 months and then call them and be like, I'm so sorry, how are you? And still feel just as close and just as loved. But in general, I try to keep up with my friends a little bit more than that. And keeping friendships alive does take effort. And I think it takes as I said, number one, intentionality on just choosing who you know you're willing to put the effort in for. Because as life progresses, the amount of time that we have to give to people just like seems to just keep going down. So knowing who your list is of the people that you will be willing to put in the time and the effort for, I think is number one. That can be kind of hard because I don't mean like rank your friends, but more in general understand that there is limited time. And so you do need to understand, like, be realistic about the kind of resources that you have to give others. And that can come with a harsh reality as well of like, yeah, maybe there are just some people that you do enjoy their company, but are they the kind of friends that you see in your life 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And is that friendship worth giving up some of your time for now? That sounds, I don't know, doesn't sound the best, like giving up your time. But I mean, I hope that that's understood what I mean by that. Just spending time on keeping a friendship up, because at the end of the day, it does require time and effort. Secondly, once you know who your people are, then I think it's just like understanding that everyone's different. So I have totally different friendships with all of my favorite people. The way that I communicate with them, the things that we talk about, and the way how often that we need to talk, etc. So understand it's not like a one size fits all. This is how you keep friendships alive, but just you need to tailor that relationship very particularly to that person and y'all's friendship. Personally, I stay connected to my friends mostly through, I love voice messages. I love them. The thing that I don't love is on Apple, when you're iMessaging someone, they can't play your audio message in like 2 times speed. And I send long ones sometimes and then I feel bad because on WhatsApp, you can put it on maybe just up to 2 times speed. And that feels a little bit nicer. But anyways, I love to do voice memos because I don't love texting. I find it cumbersome and just sometimes a little bit like awkward. And just chatting about my life is a lot easier. So voice messages are definitely my thing. And then FaceTime. I definitely try to keep up with my friends over FaceTime. I try to stay pretty consistent with it. And of course, from my point of view, I'm talking about FaceTime because a lot of my friends are a long distance friendship. But whatever that looks like for you, wherever you are, if you are actually living in the same city as the majority of your friends, then go grab a coffee. I wish I could do that. There's nothing I miss more than just being able to drop by my friend's house or hang out with them and have a casual dinner or something. It sucks. It sucks to be so far. Another thing that I have been struggling with, well, not struggling with, but another thing that I am aware of, as someone living far from home, trying to keep up friendships at home, I have been thinking about how that, in a way, also needs to, like, I need to be really careful about how I do that, because whatever time I spend catching up with people at home, I am not investing into the life I have here. And that does not mean anyone at home listening to this needs to feel really bad about this. This is my choice on how I spend my time. But I think as an expat, a lot of people will relate to this. You want to invest into the people that you love and will always love at home. But then you need to balance that with also making sure that you're living in the place that you're living. And so you're not saying no to opportunities because you know that you need to call your grandparents that night. You can call your grandparents the next night. Make sure you keep up that relationship, but also not giving up things that will make you feel like where you're living is home, because you're like just trying to make sure that everything there is going to be good. So I think, once again, like, I don't know if I necessarily struggle with that. I don't really feel like it's necessarily an issue, but more of something that has been on my mind occasionally when I'm like, wow, I have to call 5 people this week. And then I also want to do things here locally and make sure that I'm also making local friends and keeping up with the people that I have made friends with here. But on that topic, I think people who live abroad will relate a little bit more to that. And just one more point that I think is probably relevant for people who are living abroad is for those milestones for people back home. So weddings, babies, birthdays, anniversaries, whatever it might be, knowing how you're going to handle those. So I had my non-negotiables on my best friend's weddings. I was always going to go home for those. I knew that when I moved abroad and I had that kind of budgeted in, I knew that I was going to have to make those trips back for those. And those were my non-negotiables. In terms of birthdays, anniversaries, babies, whatever those deaths, whatever those events might be, I think it's probably good to kind of think about what your reaction might be or what you want to do with those events, and to understand that to celebrate those that you love does not necessarily mean you need to be there in person with them. I think it can be really easy to start to feel really guilty. My best friend just had a baby in March. Oh my gosh, I haven't met him yet and I didn't go home. Like, that is not the only way I can love her and her babies, by making sure I was there within the first few months. I will see them at Christmas. I know it's still not ideal, but just having those expectations are kind of already thought about ahead of time on what you're going to do when it comes to specific milestones like this, and how you're still going to love those people and celebrate them even if you can't be there in person. Because it's not always going to be realistic that you can be there in person for all of the events, for all of the people. So how are you going to best celebrate them? How are you going to make sure they feel loved and like you're there celebrating with them? And with that, I think that's a good place for me to shush and kind of tie it back. Like, I think that once again, figuring out your 20s definitely means figuring out friendships, whether that's abroad, whether that's locally, and how to keep up old friendships, how to make new ones, what's that balance of what feels good and how many friends you have, etc. This is like really foundational to figuring out your 20s, figuring out friendships and open-endedness whenever it's not just like given to you. I think that's why friendships that are made in this stage of life and that survive this stage of life are so intentional, because you have to choose to keep up those friendships. You have to choose to invest in people. You have to choose how you're going to spend your time. And that's the best. It's so nice to leave, or to, I was going to say leave this stage of life like I'm still in my 20s. But it's so nice to live in this stage of life knowing that, like, wow, I'm so loved by having such great friends. And I'm so lucky that I have such great friendships. But I'm curious, though, for those of you who have listened and gotten to this point, what has worked for you with making friends as an adult? And I'm really curious about that question I had earlier on, like feeling like, you can't break up with friends and stuff. Does that exist, or does that feeling exist when you're living at home? Or is that specific to living abroad, and just how intense it can be to try to make friends? Very interested to hear about that from anybody who wants to, message me and let me know what you think. But that's all for today, and talk to y'all next week.